Here's my one-sentence thesis for today. Prusa Research is what happens when the most idealistic company in desktop 3D printing runs headfirst into the least idealistic market in desktop 3D printing.
And crucially, it's still standing. That's the part people skip. A lot of companies with Prusa's ideals are gone. Prusa is still shipping printers from Prague, still profitable enough to acquire companies, and still arguing about licenses in public.
So today, how a core RepRap developer built a global brand out of an open frame kit printer, why the community loyalty around this company borders on religious, and why the founder himself went on record last year saying the open hardware dream is dead. Which, when the guy named Prusa says it, that lands differently.
The big question hanging over the whole episode is whether Prusa can move up market and get more protective of its designs without burning down the exact thing that made it Prusa. Let's get into it.
The origin story here is unusually clean. Joseph Prusa wasn't a businessman who found 3D printing. He was one of the core developers of the RepRap project. That's straight from the company's own about page, and it's the single most important fact about this company.
For anyone newer to the space, RepRap was the early open source project built around the idea of a self-replicating printer, a machine that could print most of its own parts. Everything was published, designs, firmware, all of it. The entire desktop FDM market, and I mean the entire market, descends from that project.
And the i3 in original Prusa, i3 is literally the third iteration of Joseph's RepRap design. So when Prusa Research launched as a company, it wasn't selling a product it invented in a closed lab. It was selling a well-executed version of a design that already belonged to everyone.
Which sounds like a terrible business plan, right? Sell a thing anyone can copy for free. The bet that separated Prusa was that execution and support would matter more than the design itself. Anyone could download the files. Almost nobody could ship you a well-tuned kit with good documentation that actually worked when you finished assembling it.
The breakout moment is the original Prusa i3 MK2 in 2016. That's confirmed by the company's own announcement from the time. That machine is the one that turned Prusa from a respected RepRap name into a global brand.
The MK2 hit a sweet spot that basically nothing else did in 2016. Cheap enough for hobbyists, reliable enough that you weren't rebuilding it every weekend, and open enough that you could fix and modify everything yourself. The self-build kit thing mattered too. Assembling your own printer teaches you how it works, and a user who understands the machine is a loyal user. There's also a detail from the brief I love. Trade coverage from around 2021 describes Prusa investing in a fully automated print farm. They were famously printing parts for their own printers on farms of their own printers. That's the RepRap self-replication idea turned into an actual factory strategy, and it signaled early that they were thinking bigger than hobbyists.
That's also the seed of the community loyalty. There's a How To Geek piece that literally talks about the cult of Prusa. I'd put a small asterisk on the word cult, but the sentiment is real. These were people who felt like they were buying from one of their own, not from a corporation.
The asterisk matters, though. Passionate and a niche can both be true. We'll come back to whether that community is big enough to defend the business it built.
Let's trace the machines, because the product line tells the whole strategic story if you read it right. It starts with the i3 family, that open frame bed slinger design, running from the MK2 up through the MK4 today.
And the defining feature of that family wasn't any single machine, it was the upgrade path. Prusa sold you upgrade kits so your MK2 could become the next thing instead of becoming e-waste. In an industry where most vendors want you to buy a whole new printer every 2 years, that built enormous trust. It's also frankly expensive to sustain as a business model.
Then the line branches. The Mini as the smaller, cheaper entry point, and the XL as the big multi-tool machine. Both are current products on the official site. The XL is interesting because it introduced Prusa's toolchanger approach, physically swapping whole tool heads instead of pushing multiple filaments through one nozzle.
The recent shift is the one that matters most, though. The CoreXY series moves Prusa to enclose CoreXY machines, including the large format Core 1L, which trade coverage at TechRadar highlighted for its scale. That's a real architectural break. The open frame bed slinger was Prusa's signature, and the whole market moved to fast enclosed CoreXY boxes. Prusa followed.
Followed is doing some work in that sentence. The uncomfortable read is that Bambu Lab reset customer expectations for what a desktop printer looks like, and Core 1 is Prusa's answer.
I don't think that's even controversial. Enclosed CoreXY means faster motion and better results with warp-prone engineering materials like ABS or ASA, which is table stakes now for both prosumers and light professional use. Prusa needed that machine. The question was never whether, it was how late.
Then there's INDX, the new multi-material tool changing system developed with Bondtech, which is well confirmed across 3D printing industry, TCT, and voxel matters. Some headlines, Tom's Hardware among them, called it revolutionary. That's the media's word, and I'd handle it with tongs.
Handle it with tongs and a face shield. Tool changing is genuinely the better engineering answer for multi-material versus the filament swapping approach, because you're not purging material between every color change, which wastes time in plastic, but better engineering and revolutionary product are different claims. And there's a data point worth flagging. All 3DP reported the INDX price jumped $250 from the Formnext estimate by the time orders open,
which could be cost overruns, could be testing what the market will pay. Either way, a price that goes up before the product ships is not the direction you want your premium story trending.
It also tells you who this is for. A premium tool changer upgrade is not a hobbyist accessory. INDX is aimed at people running these machines for work, small manufacturers, engineering teams, print farms. The product line as a whole has been quietly migrating toward that customer for years.
Which brings us to the person driving all of it, because with this company, there really is one person. Joseph Prusa is the founder, the CEO, the name on the building, and the name on the printers. Every major strategic announcement traces back to him.
And the clearest recent evidence of how hands-on he is, in February 2026, Tom's Hardware reported that he personally took emergency command of Printed Solid, their U.S. operation, after that CEO's exit. The founder of a global printer company temporarily running a U.S. subsidiary himself is not standard corporate practice.
You can read that two ways. One, admirable. Founder rolls up sleeves, protects the U.S. operation. Two, this company has a bus factor problem. If everything important routes through Joseph, what's the bench look like?
Both readings can be true, and to be fair to the brief, we don't have good public sourcing on Prusa's broader executive team or internal culture, so I'm not going to invent one. What we can say from the record is that he's consistently outspoken. The open hardware is dead declaration, the public accusations against Chinese competitors, the licensing fights, that's all him on the record repeatedly.
There's also a halo effect to watch. Forbes and Euronews profiles frame him as a kind of European tech visionary standing up to China. Some of that framing is earned. He did help invent this industry. But visionary profiles are not business analysis, and we should keep those layers separate.
The practical takeaway is that Prusa, the company, and Prusa, the person, are inseparable for better and worse. His credibility with the community is a genuine asset most CEOs can't buy. It's also a single point of failure, and his combativeness could become a liability if the legal fights escalate.
Okay, the moat. And this is where the Prusa story gets genuinely dramatic, because the thing that was the moat, openness, is the thing they're now walking back.
Let me lay out the actual moat first, because it was never really the open designs. It was the whole stack around them. Prusa Slicer, the documentation, the support, the tuned print profiles, the upgrade path, the in-house print farm production. Openness was the marketing and the philosophy, but execution was the moat. So you could always clone the hardware. You couldn't clone the experience.
Except cloning the hardware got really good. The brief supports what everyone in the space has watched happen. Chinese competitors absorbed Prusa's published designs and shipped cheaper versions at scale. And in 2025, Prusa responded with the Open Community License, the OCL, which restricts commercial use of their released designs. That's confirmed by Tom's Hardware coverage.
and the reaction was rough. Adafruit published a legal analysis arguing the license is, quote, neither open nor for the community. When Adafruit, one of the most respected names in open hardware, says your open community license is neither of those words, that stings.
Then in August 2025, per Tech Radar and Hackaday, Joseph Prusa says outright that the open hardware dream is dead for desktop 3D printing. And here's the caveat the fact checkers flagged, and I think it's the most important question of the episode. Is that a genuine industry observation or a convenient narrative that justifies his own company's pivot away from openness?
I'll give you my honest read. It's both, and the observation part is mostly correct. The economics he's describing are real. When you publish a design and a competitor with lower costs, and he alleges government subsidies can manufacture it cheaper than you can, the open model stops funding the people doing the original engineering. That's not spin, that's arithmetic. But, and this is the part his defenders skip, the timing is awfully convenient. The eulogy for open hardware arrives in the same year as the license that lets Prusa keep the open branding while restricting what people can do with the files. If open hardware is dead, Prusa is both the mourner and one of the people holding a shovel.
And there's a genuinely spicy wrinkle. Tom's Hardware reported in May 2026 that Joseph publicly accused Bamboo Lab of violating the AGPL, calling their network setup a black box. So Prusa is simultaneously loosening its own commitment to open licenses and wielding open licenses as a weapon against its biggest competitor.
Which isn't automatically hypocritical. License compliance is license compliance regardless of your own strategy. But is it a clear-cut violation or a strategic legal threat? We don't have an independent legal determination in the sourcing, so file it as an accusation, not a finding. What I'd note is that the community frustration with Bamboo's cloud dependency is real. We saw open source workarounds spring up around exactly that black box. So Prusa is aiming at a sore spot people already feel.
So the moat restated for 2026. It's no longer we're open. It's we're the trusted, serviceable, well-supported European option, and we'll defend our IP now. Whether trust survives the licensing pivot is the open question.
That's a decent bridge to where they actually sit in the market because the position is more diversified than the maker brand image suggests. 2 partnerships from May 2025 are worth naming. Trade coverage confirms a collaboration with Molex on scalable production and a project with Philips using Prusa printers for right to repair, printing replacement parts for Philips products.
Honest question on both. Significant revenue or significant press releases? The sourcing confirms the partnerships exist. It does not tell us what they're worth.
We genuinely don't know, and I won't pretend otherwise. What I'd say from experience is that partnerships like these are usually more valuable as proof points than as revenue. When a company like Molex puts your machines in a production context, that's a reference story you can take to every other industrial customer. That's worth something, even if the direct revenue is modest.
The Philips one is clever positioning, too. Right to repair is exactly the kind of cause Prusa's community cares about, so it serves the maker brand and the corporate brand at the same time.
There's also the geography play. Prusa acquired Printed Solid, a U.S. distributor, back in 2022, and Design News confirmed by mid-2024 that Prusa printers were being assembled in the United States. Between tariff exposure and just shipping economics, having U.S. assembly is a hedge that their Chinese competitors handle very differently.
And the framing Joseph himself pushes, which shows up in Euronews and elsewhere, is Prusa as a kind of European manufacturing champion against subsidized Chinese competition. Reporting at 3Druck this May, quotes him criticizing Chinese rivals for government subsidies and Kickstarter tactics. I'd tag champion as a label he benefits from, but the underlying competitive complaint isn't fabricated.
The hard question underneath the label, can a Czech manufacturer, even with U.S. assembly, compete on cost with companies operating at Shenzhen scale with allegedly state support? Probably not on cost ever. So the position has to be premium reliability, support, repairability, ideology. The customer profile is people and businesses willing to pay more for those things.
Which loops back to the cult question. The community is loyal, that's well attested. But a premium position depends on that loyal segment being large enough and growing. And honestly, we don't have numbers on whether it's growing or shrinking relative to Bamboo's customer base. That's an honest gap in the sourcing.
It's the gap. Every strategic question about this company reduces to how big is the audience that cares about what Prusa is selling beyond the spec sheet. Nobody outside Prague knows the real answer.
Let's run the turning points, because the last few years have been dense. And a note up front. This section of the brief actually checked out cleanly, so this isn't us being dramatic. These events are all well documented.
First, 2022, the printed solid acquisition. Voxel Matters covered it at the time. That's Prusa buying its way into U.S. distribution and eventually U.S. manufacturing. In retrospect, it looks prescient, given where trade policy and shipping costs went.
Second, January 2025, the 3D Benchy controversy, which 3D printing industry covered as delightfully Benchygate. Licensing questions around the most printed boat in human history, and Prusa was in the middle of the community response, mostly notable as an early tremor of the licensing anxieties that define the rest of the year.
Third and fourth go together. 2025 brings the open community license, and August 2025 brings the open hardware is dead declaration. We've covered the substance, but as turning points, understand these as one event. The year Prusa formally stopped being an open hardware company in the traditional sense and started saying so out loud.
That's a big sentence. Fair to state it that flatly?
I think so. With one qualifier, they still publish a great deal. CAD files are still being released just under the OCL's terms now. This is a redefinition of openness rather than a retreat into full proprietary. Whether the community accepts the redefinition is a separate matter, and Adafruit's reaction suggests a chunk of it won't.
Fifth, February 2026, the printed solid CEO exits, and Joseph takes emergency command personally, per Tom's Hardware. We talked about the leadership angle, but as a turning point, it flags that the U.S. expansion, which is strategically critical, hit some kind of turbulence. The sourcing doesn't tell us what went wrong internally, and I won't guess.
The pattern across all five is a company under pressure making pragmatic moves and absorbing the reputational cost of each one. No scandal, no financial cliff that we can see, just a steady grind of hard choices. Honestly, as turning points go, these are the survivable kind.
Future watch. Let's separate confirmed from speculative because this section of the brief had soft spots. Confirmed. INDX has launched and is clearly a centerpiece of the multi-material strategy. Also confirmed via all 3DP non-FDM toolheads for the XL are in development. The company has said so.
Non-FDM toolheads on a tool changing platform is the genuinely interesting one to me. If the XL can swap in tools that aren't just extruders, think in the direction of cutting, drawing, other processes, the machine becomes a small fabrication platform rather than a printer. That's a differentiation play the spec sheet price war crowd can't easily follow, but it's in development, which means judge it when it ships.
One thing we should explicitly not carry forward. The brief floated a broader industrial push with pro machines, and the fact check couldn't verify any such product line. So no pro machines in our story. What's real is the professional lean of what already exists, the Core 1 series, the XL INDX pricing.
A good catch and worth modeling that discipline. The industrial direction is real. The specific product category was not sourced. The reasonable speculation column then. Watch the INDX pricing story, because that pre-launch price jump either becomes a footnote or the first sign that premium multi-material is a harder sell than hoped. Watch whether the OCL actually deters clones or just deters goodwill. And watch the Bamboo AGPL accusation, whether it stays rhetoric or becomes a legal filing.
I'd add a fourth, the U.S. operation. Joseph taking emergency command is by definition temporary. Who ends up running printed solid and whether U.S. manufacturing scales up or quietly stalls tells you a lot about whether the America strategy is real.
And the risk on the other side of all this, the core maker base, every move we've described, premium pricing, restrictive licensing, industrial partnerships, pulls away from the person who bought a kit in 2017 because it was cheap, open, and theirs. Prusa is betting the customer will stay for the values and the support even as the products drift up market. That bet is unproven.
It's a narrow bridge to walk. To maker, and you can't fund the engineering. To industrial, and you're just another premium vendor without the community that made you special. Let's land it. Why does Prusa Research matter? Because it's the live experiment on whether openness, community, and Western manufacturing can survive as a business model in a market that's been thoroughly commoditized. Whatever happens to Prusa is a preview for every company trying that combination.
Who should pay attention? Anyone buying a machine for real work who cares about repairability and long-term support, because that's the trade Prusa is explicitly offering versus cheaper rivals, and anyone in open hardware generally, because the OCL fight is going to shape how the next generation of hardware companies think about publishing designs at all. My
one open question for listeners to track: does the community forgive the licensing pivot? Not the press, not Adafruit's lawyers, the actual buyers. If the loyal base keeps buying CoreXY and INDX units through this transition, Prusa has successfully redefined what it stands for. If they drift to the cheaper machines, the pivot saved the IP and lost the customers.
Mine is simpler. Watch what Yosef does, not what he says. He's loud, and the rhetoric about dead dreams and subsidized rivals makes headlines. But the actual moves, U.S. assembly, tool changers, corporate partnerships, a founder personally flying in to steady a subsidiary, describe a pragmatic manufacturer fighting hard for a defensible niche. That company is less romantic than the legend. I mean, it might outlive it.
That's the episode. Next week, another company under the loop. Until then, keep your first layers clean.